A soldier reunited with his German Shepherd after 5 years. The dog's reaction shocked everyone. Sergeant Daniel Hayes stepped off the bus, his heavy boots hitting the pavement with a thud. The familiar sense of his hometown filled his nostrils: fresh-cut grass, car exhaust, and the subtle aroma of the nearby bakery. But after 5 long years serving overseas, everything felt foreign. He hefted his green duffel bag over his shoulder and began the short walk to his childhood home. With each step, memories of his loyal companion Max flooded his mind. The German Shepherd had been more than just his K9 partner in the military. Max was his best friend, his protector, his rock in the chaos of combat. Leaving Max behind when his tour ended had been gut-wrenching. Now, Daniel was determined to bring Max home where he belonged. He had made some inquiries and tracked down Max's location to a private security firm a few towns over. Tomorrow, he will go there and reunite with his battle buddy at long last. A smile tugged at Daniel's lips at the thought. His mom threw open the front door as he approached, tears already streaming down her face. She wrapped Daniel in a tight hug, as if afraid he would disappear again. "Welcome home, honey," she whispered. "We missed you so much." Daniel allowed himself to relax into her embrace for a moment, inhaling the comforting scent of her perfume. "Miss you too, Mom. It's good to be back." Sleep eluded Daniel that first night, even in the familiar comfort of his childhood bed. The silence felt oppressive after years of living in close quarters with his unit, ever alert for signs of danger. When he did drift off, nightmares of explosions and fallen comrades jolted him awake, heart pounding and skin slick with sweat. He rose with the sun, too restless to linger in bed. After a quick shower, he pulled on jeans and a plain gray t-shirt before heading downstairs. His parents were already in the kitchen, coffee brewed and breakfast underway. "Morning, son," his dad said, glancing up from the sizzling bacon. "Sleep okay?" Daniel shrugged. "About as well as can be expected. Listen, I appreciate you guys making a fuss and all, but there's something I need to do today." His mom's brow furrowed with concern as she set a mug of steaming coffee in front of him. "Is everything all right? You know we're here for you, honey, whatever you need." "I know, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. It's just, I need to go get Max. I found out where he is." Understanding dawned on his parents' faces. They knew how much Max meant to him. "Of course," his dad said. "You do what you need to do. We'll be here when you get back." Daniel took a long sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. He had a feeling he would need the caffeine boost for what lay ahead. He thought back to the last time he had seen Max, the day he had handed over his leash and boarded the transport plane alone. Max had strained against his new handler, whining and scrabbling to get to Daniel, confusion and abandonment writ large on his expressive face. It had taken every ounce of Daniel's strength not to snatch him back, to hang on and never let go. But duty called, and dogs like Max were too valuable a resource to retire after a single handler's tour. So he had crouched down, taken Max's furry face in his hands, and made him a solemn promise that no matter what, no matter how long it took, they would be together again someday. That Max would never be just another piece of equipment to him, never a weapon to be used up and discarded. He was a soldier, a hero, family, and Daniel intended to keep his word. Armed with the address of Titanium Security Solutions, Daniel hopped into his dad's old pickup truck and hit the road. His stomach churned with nerves and anticipation as the miles rolled by. What if Max didn't remember him after all this time? What if they refused to let him see his dog? He shook off the doubts. Max was his partner, and no amount of time or distance could change that bond. They had been through hell and back together. A few years apart was nothing in comparison. Daniel pulled into the parking lot of an imposing gray building on the outskirts of the neighboring city. It looked more like a prison than an office, with barbed wire topping the perimeter fences. He steeled himself and marched to the front door, squaring his shoulders as if he were back in uniform. "Can I help you?" a bored-looking receptionist asked without glancing up from her computer screen. My name is Sergeant Daniel Hayes. I'm here to retrieve my K-9 partner, Max. I was told he was transferred here after my deployment ended. That got her attention. She looked Daniel up and down, taking in his civilian clothes and the determined set of his jaw. One moment, please. She pressed a button on her headset. Mr. Drake, there's a Sergeant Hayes here to see you about one of the dogs. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides as he waited. Whoever this Mr. Drake was, he better not try to stop Daniel from seeing Max. He had already lost too many friends, too many pieces of himself, to this war. He wouldn't lose Max too. Not without a fight. Ethan Drake looked exactly like the kind of man who would run a place like Titanium Security's hard eyes, sharp suit, and air of barely restrained aggression. He didn't bother to stand when Daniel entered his office. Sergeant Hayes, he said, tone clipped. I understand you're inquiring about a German Shepherd in our program, a former military dog called Max. That's right, Daniel said, taking a seat across the desk without being invited. Something about Drake set his teeth on edge. Max was my partner. I've come to bring him home now that I'm back stateside. Drake leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I'm afraid that won't be possible. All dogs brought into Titanium Security are legally our property. We paid top dollar for Max. He's a valuable asset to our operation. Daniel's blood ran cold. Paid who? Max doesn't belong to anyone but me. We served together, I trained him, he lived with me. Be that as it may, Drake cut in, the U.S. military has deemed Max fit for continued service and sold his contract to our firm. We've already invested substantial resources into his transition. He's no longer your concern. The hell he isn't. Daniel snapped, shooting to his feet. Max is more than just some piece of equipment to be bought and sold. He's a hero. He saved my life more times than I can count. And I won't let you treat him like he's nothing more than a weapon. Drake's eyes narrowed. Careful, Sergeant. I understand you have an emotional attachment to the animal, but what you're asking for simply isn't going to happen. You have no legal right to him anymore. Now, if there's nothing else, I have a business to run. I trust you can see yourself out. Seething, Daniel turned on his heel. He had been dismissed, both by Drake and by the military machine that had chewed up him and Max and so many others, only to spit them out when they were no longer needed. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Max was his dog, his partner, his family. And if Daniel had to go through hell all over again to bring him home, then that's exactly what he would do. He stalked out of Titanium, plans already forming in his mind. He would need allies. Leverage. A way to make Drake understand that Max wasn't just some asset to be used until he broke and then discarded. Daniel had been fighting for what he believed in his whole life. This would be no different. For Max, for their bond, he would fight to his last breath. The receptionist eyed him nervously as he stormed past, as if she could sense the fire burning in his veins. He paused, forcing himself to meet her gaze. To her credit, she didn't shrink back. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think what you're doing is brave. That dog is lucky to have you. Daniel nodded, throat tight. I'm the lucky one, he managed. And I won't stop until I make this right. That's a promise. Fury propelled Daniel out of the Titanium Security building, blood pounding in his ears. That Drake asshole didn't know who he was messing with. No matter what it took, Daniel vowed to free Max from this cold, mercenary place. He owed his battle buddy at least that much. First things first, he needed information and allies. Back at home, he booted up his laptop and began searching for anything he could find on Titanium Security Solutions and their handling of K-9 officers. Poring over records and news articles, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. Titanium had a reputation for ruthless efficiency. They contracted out dogs like Max to the highest bidder, from wealthy private clients to shady overseas operations. Abuse wasn't uncommon, it was simply seen as a tool to ensure obedience and results. Some handlers even faced accusations of neglect and cruelty. The more Daniel read, the more his resolve hardened. He couldn't leave Max in the hands of these people. But Drake had made it clear he wouldn't release the shepherd without a fight. Well then, a fight was exactly what he would get. Daniel reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the one he wanted. Steve Hendricks had been his squad mate, his spotter, his closest friend outside of Max. If anyone would understand what Daniel was up against, it was him. "Hey brother," Steve said as soon as he picked up, concerned with coloring his normally laid-back tone. "I figured I'd be hearing from you. How are you holding up?" Daniel sighed, scrubbing a hand over his face. "Honestly? Not great. I went to see Max today. To bring him home. But the private security firm that has him now, Titanium, they're not going to give him up easily." "Ah hell," Steve said. "I've heard of them. They've got a rep for being real hardasses. Lot of ex-military, a lot of gray area contracts, you know?" "Yeah, I'm getting that picture. Steve, I can't leave him there. Max, he's everything. I have to get him back, whatever it takes." "I hear you, man. And I've got your six, same as always. Tell me what you need." Daniel's throat tightened with gratitude. "For now, just spread the word, I guess. See if anyone in your network has any dirt on Titanium that we could use as leverage. And maybe start thinking about how we could bring some heat down on them in the media." Drake seems like the kind of guy who cares a lot about image. "On it," Steve said firmly. "We'll get Max back where he belongs, Daniel. That's a promise. No dog gets left behind, not on my watch." Daniel managed a smile. Steve always had been the best of them. "Thanks, brother. I'll keep you posted." He hung up feeling marginally lighter. He had his mission now, and he had backup. It was a start. Next on his list was legal counsel. He needed someone who could help him navigate the tangle of contracts and military working dog regulations to find any loophole or pressure point he could exploit against Titanium. And he thought he might know just the person. Coffee shops and late nights on the phone became Daniel's new normal in the weeks following the reunion with Drake. He reached out to everyone he could think of: JAG officers, K9 advocacy groups, fellow handlers, anyone who might be able to help him navigate the red tape surrounding Max. Slowly but surely, he began assembling a team. Vanessa, an animal-loving lawyer fresh out of JAG Corps, agreed to take on his case pro bono. Steve and several other veteran buddies launched a social media campaign to raise awareness about Titanium's treatment of military dogs. And a grizzled ex-handler named Jim came out of retirement to lend his expertise on MWD regulations and training practices. But every small step forward seemed to be met with obstacles and delays from Titanium. Drake and his army of attorneys stonewalled at every turn, exploiting every loophole to keep Max firmly in their clutches. Weeks dragged into months with no real progress. Until one day, an unexpected call came from someone inside Titanium itself, a young handler named Liam who was secretly appalled by the way dogs like Max were treated there. "I saw how you fought for him, the bond you two clearly share," Liam said, voice tight with nerves even over the phone. "What they're doing to Max, to all these dogs, it isn't right. I want to help, if I can. Meet me tomorrow and I'll tell you what I know." Daniel's heart pounded as he hung up, hardly daring to hope. A whistleblower from inside Titanium's walls could be the break he so desperately needed. But he couldn't shake the feeling of unease prickling at the back of his neck. If Liam's claims about the company were true, then Max could be in even more danger than Daniel had realized. Heart racing, Daniel scanned the bustling coffee shop, eyes peeled for the slight, dark-haired man Liam had described. He spotted him hovering nervously by the pickup counter and crossed the room to clasp his hand. "Thank you for reaching out," he said as they slid into a secluded booth. "I can't tell you how much it means to me, knowing Max has someone in his corner in that place." Liam's expression was bleak. I wish I could do more. He glanced around warily before hunching over the table. Look, Hayes, the way they treat dogs in Titanium's programs, it's bad. He told Daniel how the dogs were housed in stark kennels, isolated except during training sessions designed to sharpen their aggression. How they were routinely pushed past exhaustion, shocked or choked as punishment for the slightest hesitation or failure. How their value was measured only in obedience and ferocity, not in their intelligence, loyalty, and heart. Daniel's stomach churned at the images Liam painted. Nausea gave way to fury. Max was suffering, being warped into a tool of violence and greed. I have to get him out of there, he bit out between clenched teeth. Whatever it takes. This can't go on. Liam swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. There may be a way. In 2 months, Titanium is holding a big demo for potential clients, a chance to show off the dogs and drum up more contracts. I think I can get you in. He held up a hand before Daniel could interrupt. You have to understand the risk. If Drake catches you. He shook his head. He's not a forgiving man. You'd be done. Finished. Probably land yourself in a cell right next to his. I don't care, Daniel growled. I'd walk through fire for Max prison? Bring it on. Liam searched his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I'm in. Let's bring Max home. Hope, bright and fierce, kindled in Daniel's chest. In 2 months, he would see his partner again. Hold him, assure him that he hadn't been forgotten or left behind. And God help anyone, even Ethan Drake himself, who tried to stand in his way. The next 2 months passed in a blur of feverish preparation. Vanessa filed injunctions and argued Max's case before increasingly high courts. Steve's online campaign to #FreeMax went viral, earning them thousands of supporters around the world. Even Jim came out of retirement to pull in old favors and make some strategic phone calls on Max's behalf. But the linchpin of it all was Liam, the man on the inside. Despite the risk to himself, he proved invaluable, smuggling out documents and recordings that confirmed Titanium's negligent practices, putting them in touch with other handlers who wanted better for their dogs, keeping them apprised of Max's condition and routine. It was the hardest thing Daniel had ever done, watching those grainy security camera feeds Liam sent. Seeing Max strain against his choke chain, flinch from rough hands and harsher voices. The once proud shepherd looked thinner now, his coat dull, his eyes wary. It made Daniel want to storm the gates of Titanium, laws and consequences be damned. But he knew he had to be smart. For Max's sake, he had to keep his cool, bide his time until the moment was right. And it was almost upon them. The night before the big Titanium demo, Daniel could scarcely sit still, his body practically vibrating with nervous energy. Vanessa and Steve had flown in to join him, Jim arriving the day prior to go over every detail of their plan. They gathered in Daniel's parents' living room, Chinese takeout growing cold on the coffee table as they reviewed contingencies for the 100th time. Remember, we'll only have one shot at this, Jim said gruffly, jabbing a finger at the blueprint of the Titanium compound. Liam will get Daniel inside during the demo, but we'll need to be ready to roll as soon as he gives the signal. Vanessa, you'll be standing by with the sheriff to serve Drake his walking papers. Steve, you're our eyes in the sky and our getaway driver. Everyone clear? They all nodded, faces set with grim determination. This was it. The culmination of months of blood, sweat, and tears. The day they brought Max home for good. Daniel met each of their gazes in turn, heart swelling with gratitude and resolve. I can't thank you all enough, he said roughly. For standing by me, for fighting for Max. I couldn't have done this without you. Vanessa reached out to squeeze his hand. We're with you, Daniel. No matter what happens tomorrow, we're in this together. Damn straight, Steve said with a fierce grin. Now let's go get our boy back. The day of the Titanium demo dawned gray and cold, a steady drizzle falling as Daniel and his friends pulled into the parking lot. Daniel's heart jackhammered against his ribs, his whole body one tightly coiled spring of anticipation and dread. Somewhere inside that fortress-like compound, Max was waiting for him. Depending on him. Daniel would walk through hell itself to reach him, but he prayed it wouldn't come to that. He prayed their plan would work, that the system that had torn them apart would, for once, work in their favor to bring them back together. Liam met them at the gate, face pinched and pale. Drake's on high alert, he murmured as he clipped a visitor's badge to Daniel's jacket. I don't know how, but I think he suspects something's up. Daniel set his jaw. Doesn't matter. We're not backing down. Not when we're this close. Liam searched his face, then nodded. Okay. The demo starts at 10. I'll try to get you as close to the ring as possible. Just be careful, all right? I don't want to see you get hurt. His gaze cut to Vanessa and Steve. Any of you. We'll be careful, Daniel promised. And Liam? Thank you. For everything. I won't forget this. The younger man ducked his head. Thank me for getting Max out of here. That's all I want. With a final nod, Daniel let Liam lead him into the belly of the beast. The facility was a maze of concrete and steel, the air heavy with bleach and dog. It took every ounce of Daniel's self-control not to break into a run, shouting Max's name. At last, they reached a cavernous room dominated by a large central arena. Titanium guards prowled the perimeter, while well-heeled VIPs sipped champagne and eyed the iron-barred enclosures housing the dogs. Daniel's throat closed when he spotted a familiar black Antan shepherd, hunched and trembling in the corner of an enclosure. Max. God, he looked so small. So scared. Daniel's fingers itched to reach through the bars, to offer comfort and promises. But he held himself back. Soon. He'd have Max in his arms again soon. The squeal of a mic pulled his attention to the center of the room, where Ethan Drake stood grandly surveying his audience. Welcome, esteemed guests, to the future of private security, he announced. Today, you will witness the bleeding edge in K9 defense technology. The most highly trained, highly skilled dogs in the world, coupled with our patented handling techniques that maximize performance and minimize liability. And for one lucky client, the jewel in Titanium's crown can be yours today, Max. On cue, two burly trainers dragged Max into the ring, the shepherd skating and scrabbling on the slick floor. Daniel's heart seized at the sight of his partner, his brave, loyal Max, muzzled and chained like a beast, eyes rolling white in distress. Drake smiled coldly. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the ultimate personal protection asset. Attack trained, inoculated against pain and distraction, guaranteed to neutralize any threat. Allow me to demonstrate. On some hidden signal, a padded assailant burst into the arena, charging at Drake with a baton raised. Attack! Drake barked, unclipping Max's lead. But Max didn't move. He cowered, tail curled under, making himself as small as possible even as the assailant bore down on him. Drake's face purpled. He yanked hard on Max's choke chain, snarling, "Attack, damn you!" Max yelped and stumbled, but still he didn't lunge. In that moment, meeting the dog's terrified but steadfast gaze, Daniel understood. Max remembered. Despite everything they'd done to him, all their cruel conditioning, Max remembered what Daniel had taught him. Only strike to protect. Only attack in defense. Never become the monster they want you to be. Pride and love swelled in Daniel's chest until he thought it might burst. His partner, his unshakable friend, was still there. Still fighting. Still Max. Max, he shouted, surging forward before Liam could stop him. Max, heel. Every head in the room swiveled to stare at him, but Daniel only had eyes for one. He pulled off his cap and glasses, letting Max see his face. Max, come. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then, with a piercing whine, Max lunged, not at the assailant, but straight at Daniel, straining against his lead with every fiber of his being. The crack of the chain snapping was like a gunshot. In the frozen instant of shock that followed, Max hurtled across the arena and leapt at Daniel in a blur of fur and frantic joy. The impact sent them both crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and ecstatic kisses. Daniel buried his face in Max's ruff, sobbing and laughing all at once as the shepherd wiggled and whined and licked every inch of him he could reach. "I've got you," he choked out, holding on for dear life. "I've got you, buddy. I'm here. I'm here." The moments after that passed in a whirlwind. Drake purple with rage, shrieking for security. Vanessa striding in with the sheriff at her heels, legal documents brandished like a weapon. Steve, grinning ear to ear, bundling Daniel and Max into a waiting van while cameras flashed and journalists shouted over each other. Through it all, Daniel just clutched Max, unable to let go even for a second. His face ached from smiling, his arms from holding on so tight, but it was the sweetest pain he had ever known. "You did it," Liam kept saying, shaking his head in amazed disbelief. "You crazy son of a bitch, you really did it." "We did it," Daniel corrected fiercely, pulling him into a rough embrace. "None of this would have happened without you, Liam. I owe you everything." Vanessa, sorting through a stack of papers, lifted her head to beam at them. "He's not wrong. The state attorney general is already preparing a case against Drake and Titanium. Liam, with your testimony, I think we've got him dead to rights." Even Jim looked a bit misty-eyed as he clapped Daniel on the back. "You did good, son. Both of you. Guess they underestimated the bond between a handler and his dog, huh?" Daniel glanced down at Max, now sprawled contentedly across his lap as Steve guided the van through the snarl of traffic around Titanium. "They always do," he murmured. "But they won't make that mistake again. Not after today." The truth was, it still didn't feel quite real. He kept expecting to blink and wake up, to find himself back in that grim facility, staring at Max through iron bars. But the warm weight in his arms, the soft fur under his fingers, the rumble of a tail thumping against his leg, that was real. Max was real. They were together. They were safe. And no one, not Ethan Drake or the military or God himself, would ever tear them apart again. The media storm over the daring dog rescue raged for weeks. Daniel and Max were hounded, pun absolutely intended, according to Steve, by reporters, TV anchors, and well-wishers everywhere they went. The president even called to congratulate them, though Daniel had a sneaking suspicion that had more to do with the incredible PR opportunity than any actual concern for their well-being. But slowly, inevitably, the furor died down. The 24-hour news cycle moved on to the next big story. The ASPCA stepped up their lobbying to reform the military working dog adoption process, with Vanessa leading the charge. Drake and his lackeys scrambled to cover their asses and point fingers as the AG's investigation turned up more and more damning evidence of abuse and neglect. Through it all, Daniel just focused on Max. On giving his brave, battered friend the peace and comfort and healing he deserved. They went for long walks in the quiet woods, spent evenings dozing together in front of the fireplace, worked with a trainer Jim recommended to relearn how to trust, how to be simply dog and man. Some wounds went too deep to ever fully heal, Daniel knew. The night terrors of gunfire and blood, the flinch from sudden movements, the wariness of strangers, those reflexes had kept them alive in the desert, and they wouldn't fade easily. But each small victory felt enormous. The first time Max dozed off with his head in Daniel's lap, unafraid. The first time his tail wagged at the sight of Daniel's parents, rather than tucking under his belly. The first bark of joy as they wrestled in the grass, so different from the harsh snarls the Titanium trainers had worked so hard to ingrain. Slowly, day by hard-won day, Daniel watched Max come back to himself. Watched the light return to his eyes, the spring to his step, the openness to his body language. It helped, he thought, that they were healing together. Learning how to live again, in the after. Making the daily choice to come back to their home, their family, their bond. Because that's what Max was to him. More than a partner, more than a pet, Max was his family. The other half of his heart. Where Daniel went, Max would go, and vice versa. no matter what. And if that meant having to testify against Drake and Titanium in court, enduring the media circus for as long as necessary to ensure no dog would ever suffer at their hands again, then that's what Daniel would do. With Max by his side, he could face anything. The day of the sentencing hearing dawned bright and cold. Daniel stood on the courthouse steps, Max a steady presence leaning against his thigh, watching the crowd of reporters and onlookers jostling for position. Steve, Vanessa, Jim, and Liam flanked him, a united front. They had been through so much together, this strange little band of brothers and sister. Daniel didn't know if he would ever be able to repay them for all they had risked, all they had sacrificed, to bring Max home. But he knew he would spend the rest of his life trying. "Are you ready for this?" Vanessa asked softly, smoothing back a strand of dark hair. Daniel blew out a breath. "As I'll ever be. I just want it to be over. I want to take Max home and never have to think about Drake or Titanium ever again." "You will," Steve said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Today's the day we put those bastards away for good. They messed with the wrong dog." Daniel huffed a laugh, dropping a hand to scratch behind Max's ears. "Damn right they did." Together, they climbed the steps and entered the courtroom. Drake was already there, sandwiched between his defense team, face like a thundercloud. Daniel had to resist the urge to lunge across the aisle and punch him in his perfectly straight teeth. Max, sensing the tension, whined and pressed closer to Daniel's side. He had endured so much, Daniel thought fiercely. Been pushed past all endurance, subjected to abuse and manipulation and trauma, and yet here he was. Still pressing forward. Still fighting for the happy ending he deserved. They all deserved it. Him, Max, the thousands of other military working dogs out there, serving beside handlers who would walk through fire for them. Who understood the depth of that bond, unshakable and true. When the judge entered and called the court to order, it was Liam who stood first to testify. The words spilled out of him, the ugly truth of all he had seen in Titanium's facilities. The neglect, the abuse, the total lack of regard for the well-being of the dogs in their care. Daniel watched as the color drained from Drake's face. As the judge's expression darkened, her lips thinned to a bloodless line. He gripped Max's fur, hoping for a fragile moth's wing beating in his chest. Next was Vanessa, outlining the dozens of civil rights complaints, whistleblower accounts, and federal law violations her office had uncovered in their investigation. Then Jim, gravelly voiced but steady, recounting his decades in the military dog training program and exactly how Titanium's methods diverged from humane, evidence-based best practices. Then, finally, it was Daniel's turn. Max whined as he started to stand, pawing anxiously at his knee. Daniel crouched down, taking his furry face in both hands. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right back, I promise." Max's liquid brown eyes locked onto his, searching. Then, with a huff, he sat back on his haunches. Waiting. Trusting. Daniel's heart swelled and cracked, all at once. "Good boy," he whispered. "Best boy." Then he stood, squared his shoulders, and approached the witness stand.